In this podcast episode, Tim Burchett, a U.S. Congressman from Tennessee, discusses a wide range of topics, including UFO disclosure, his personal background, government secrecy, insider trading within Congress, the Taliban's funding, alternative energy, mental health, and various political and social issues. The conversation touches upon compelling experiences with classified information, political dynamics around controversial subjects, and insights from his life and career. Burchett opens with his anticipation of a briefing about UFO disclosures, reflecting skepticism toward government transparency given decades of cover-ups dating back to 1947. He shares his early interest sparked by books as a child and his gradual exposure to classified information after entering government, particularly Congress. According to him, the government has tightly controlled knowledge about unidentified aerial phenomena, often restricting information even from the president and selectively briefing a limited number of insiders. He recounts encounters with pilots who witnessed unexplained aerial objects exhibiting extraordinary speeds and maneuvers beyond human technology, facing removal from duty and interrogation to maintain secrecy. Burchett describes efforts by himself and colleagues like Matt Gaetz and Tim Luna to obtain credible information through congressional briefings, encountering resistance and obfuscation from military and intelligence officials. Regarding recent UFO reports, Burchett criticizes sanitized government releases, emphasizing the public's enduring belief, over 55%, that we are not alone. He mentions the significance of underwater sightings and alleged deep-sea bases for extraterrestrial craft capable of speeds and sizes beyond human capabilities. Despite these claims, he suggests much of the footage and evidence remain heavily redacted or withheld. Burchett also reflects on government tactics of misinformation and disruption aimed at Congress members pursuing disclosure efforts. He explains how intelligence agencies attempt to undermine investigations by inserting disruptive participants in hearings and controlling narratives, often leveraging personal vulnerabilities such as scandals or compromising material. Burchett describes his upbringing in East Tennessee by parents who served in World War II, his father a Marine and his mother a wartime aviator, shaping his American patriotism and work ethic. He recalls a rural childhood with access to libraries where he first encountered literature on UFOs and mysteries, fostering a lifelong interest. His political tenure spans over 2 decades, including 16 years in the Tennessee state legislature, 8 years as Knox County mayor, and 8 years in the U.S. Congress. His path to government began with grassroots campaigning, door-knocking, and building relationships with everyday citizens, contrasting with many Washington insiders. He remarks on the culture in Congress, including ethical challenges, insider trading, and lobbying pressures that sway decisions. Burchett advocates for legislation preventing members from owning individual stocks to avoid conflicts of interest, citing cases of lucrative trading tied to insider knowledge, particularly around defense contracts and missile systems. Despite limited resources, Burchett maintains connections with constituents and fosters a reputation rooted in authenticity and directness. He shares anecdotes from political life, reflecting the influence of power dynamics, financial incentives, and governmental inertia. Burchett openly criticizes the widespread practice of stock trading by members of Congress and their families, highlighting the ethical contradictions between lawmakers' financial windfalls and legislative responsibilities. He references well-known figures, including Nancy Pelosi, and recent social media exposés that document suspicious timing of stock transactions coinciding with sensitive information. He points out how insiders benefit from defense spending and political decisions, often concealed under the guise of mutual funds, yet still presenting conflicts. Burchett contrasts these systemic issues with his own experiences when attempting to ethically market handmade skateboards, which he is restricted from commercializing due to congressional ethics rules. The discussion expands into how lobbyists exert influence, sometimes through personal and illicit means, reflecting the deeply ingrained culture of compromise and coercion in Washington. He emphasizes human nature's role in perpetuating these problems, fueled by greed and pressures to keep up within a wealthy elite. Addressing themes connected to UFOs, Burchett discusses conspiracy theories and realities surrounding alternative energy technologies. He suggests that advanced propulsion and energy solutions, allegedly back-engineered from recovered extraterrestrial craft, have been suppressed by entrenched interests, including the military-industrial complex and oil industries, which profit from the current energy paradigm. Burchett narrates how researchers and scientists working on such technologies face threats, disappearances, or mysterious deaths, fueling public suspicion about a coordinated effort to silence breakthroughs that could disrupt the global economy. He reflects on attempts to introduce legislation supporting disclosure and whistleblower protections, noting that efforts are repeatedly stalled or killed in Senate committees. The economic and political ramifications of releasing revolutionary technologies are substantial, explaining official hesitancy and misinformation campaigns. The conversation shifts toward mental health, focusing on the emerging role of psychedelics as therapeutic agents for conditions like PTSD, depression, and substance abuse. Burchett praises recent legislative changes, including efforts by former President Trump and other lawmakers to facilitate clinical research and decriminalization of compounds like psilocybin and ibogaine. He underscores the epidemic of mental health issues, opioid addiction, and the inadequacy of current pharmaceutical treatments. Burchett shares testimonies of veterans, first responders, and individuals who have benefited from controlled psychedelic therapies, describing them as potentially transformative in reducing brain atrophy and improving quality of life. The discussion contextualizes the stigma against psychedelics, attributing it to entrenched interests in big pharma and regulatory inertia rather than scientific evidence. Burchett calls for expanded access and education around these treatments. Burchett reveals startling information about U.S. government foreign aid sent to Afghanistan, specifically that the Taliban receives approximately $40 million in cash per week through United Nations-managed programs and non-governmental organizations, NGOs. This flow of cash is justified by the economic conditions and banking limitations in Afghanistan, but has been exploited by corrupt entities. He explains how money laundering through NGOs often funnels illicit funds back into various political campaigns and dark money groups within the U.S., perpetuating cycles of fraud and foreign policy mismanagement. He expresses frustration with bipartisan resistance to oversight legislation aimed at curtailing these abuses. Burchett recounts his collaboration with individuals on the ground in Afghanistan and within Congress to expose and limit the flow of funds to the Taliban, criticizing the complacency and complicity in Washington that enables the Taliban to sustain operations despite their anti-American stance and human rights abuses. Throughout the discussion, Burchett offers candid reflections on the culture within Washington, describing it as rife with corruption, insider deals, and manipulation. He shares anecdotes highlighting how power operates through compromat, personal vulnerabilities, and a revolving door between politics and special interests. He expresses disappointment in leadership and the slow pace of reform, recognizing that many reforms pass the House but stall in the Senate or executive branches. Despite this, Burchett emphasizes the need for accountability and transparency as a foundation for restoring public trust. His narratives emphasize the impact of lobbyists and industry groups in shaping policy to their benefit, often at the expense of American taxpayers and national interests. Burchett details encounters with intelligence officials and secretive briefings that often mix accurate information with deliberate disinformation designed to confuse or derail researchers and policymakers. He warns of hooks, deliberate leaks containing false details to identify whistleblowers or sources of leaks. He discusses the high level of compartmentalization within agencies managing UFO and national security information, noting that many officials have only limited access to the full picture and that even presidents may be kept uninformed about critical information. Burchett records how committee members and staff frequently confront obfuscation and subtle intimidation when investigating sensitive issues such as unidentified aerial phenomena or possible hybrid programs, the latter involving rumors of alien-human breeding experiments, though these claims remain unverified. Burchett engages with religious perspectives on UFOs and alien phenomena, responding to Christian criticism, claiming these are demonic manifestations. He clarifies his faith and reasoning, rejecting the demon explanation and arguing that if such beings exist, they would not necessarily align with spiritual evil. He highlights the challenge of reconciling cultural and religious belief systems with emerging revelations about extraterrestrial life, urging a balanced and open-minded approach. Drawing on his family's military background and service, Burchett shares personal stories about the toll of war and his father's experiences in World War II and post-war conflicts involving China. He expresses sorrow over the human costs of war and the feeling that America often neglects its veterans. He praises efforts to improve veteran care, including access to mental health treatments and alternative therapies. Burchett stresses the sacrifices of service members and the imperative to honor them by addressing systemic issues such as PTSD and societal neglect. Burchett critiques mainstream media's role in shaping public perception, noting the diminishing trust and the rise of independent journalism. He points to the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic as a prime example of institutional failure and manipulation, highlighting controversial figures like Dr. Fauci. He addresses the polarization fueled by media narratives and the extent of internet surveillance and data exploitation used to influence opinions and behavior. His discussion acknowledges the complexity of controlling narratives in the modern information environment and the emergence of grassroots efforts to uncover truth. Burchett shares lighter moments discussing his handmade skateboards, which he crafts personally from bamboo, oak, and banana fibers, lamenting that congressional ethics rules limit his ability to sell them commercially. He recounts humorous and heartfelt stories from his life, from family tales to his appreciation for community, illustrating the human side of a public figure deeply engaged in complex national issues. Addressing the 2017 shooting of President Trump, Burchett firmly rejects conspiracy theories suggesting the event was staged, emphasizing the improbability of the precise shot that wounded Trump through his ear. He relates insights from security professionals on the event's failures and discusses the general atmosphere of political violence and attempts to undermine the constitutional order, noting concerns about MK-Ultra-style programmed individuals used to destabilize society. Throughout the episode, Burchett expresses mixed feelings about the nature of extraterrestrial life, recognizing the possibility of multiple types of beings, but maintaining cautious skepticism about extreme claims. He contemplates the strategic reasons behind the secrecy, including societal disruption, readiness for disclosure, and control of technology. Burchett questions humanity's place in the cosmos, expressing humility about humans being the pinnacle of creation. Burchett stresses that regardless of the potential societal upheaval, the public has a fundamental right to know the truth about extraterrestrial phenomena and government secrets. He criticizes the decades-long cover-up as unjust and believes that gradual disclosure may be forthcoming, but doubts full transparency will ever be granted. He conveys a sense of responsibility to advocate for disclosure, knowing the risks involved, and calls on society to remain vigilant and demand accountability from those in power.